My greetings from Sydney, Australia. We meet at a time of substantial global challenges, not least, in my view, if you'll allow me to share it with you, the challenge of global warming, which is confirming its reality year by year. And of course, that shapes the world we live in and the challenge of producing a world where there is peace, justice, and strong institutions. I want to home in on SDG number 16, which is about these challenges. But I wanted to start by saying that the leadership of the Secretary-General in drawing the world's attention to the persistent challenge of climate is very valid, because the problems we face in achieving peace, security and robust institutions is all the greater given the difficulty the people of this planet have in surviving against sometimes catastrophically forceful changes in the way the natural world works. We've witnessed tragically a retreat of the civic space, where we thought people could operate independent of government and make criticisms and seek information and fight for their rights. For a lot of the world's people, for far too many, the opportunity of speaking out and advancing the frontiers of freedom, that's becoming restricted. And we need the views of global participants on the evidence of this. Is it in fact the case, as it seems to me, that this civic space is becoming restricted and is not being expanded? And if so, what are some of the answers? How can rulers facing what they believe are the great challenges of solving the problems they're forced to solve on behalf of their people be persuaded to stick to the norms of political contestability and pluralism, respecting the views of others and not persecuting people for holding dissident opinions? When our societies celebrate a dissident, instead of turning the forces of the state on him or her, they represent a great vote of confidence in our culture, in our civilization. And we need more leaders to see that and to be persuaded not to resort to the easier task of closing down dissonant voices, of limiting the room for difference, of not permitting people who think they're discriminated against or repressed to speak out and draw attention to their case. This has particular sensitivity to people already disadvantaged, in many cases women and girls, immigrants, including those who suddenly find themselves without a nationality, at loose in the world, seeking a new home, and persons of colour, many times in the context of increasing conflicts and violence. We know that interstate conflict in the world has probably been reduced. And the wars most common these days are civil wars, wars that pitch families against families. We need views on how the world, how the international community can respond to that challenge, and how we can guide the participants towards peaceful solutions, the peaceful resolution of the issues that divide them. We need to talk up in defence of those who are now risking their lives seeking to give the public information. As a journalist myself, I feel particularly sensitive about how reporters are at risk in many jurisdictions from seeking just to do that, to find out information on behalf of their publics and to have that information published. Too many journalists are in prison. The UN has charted hundreds of cases where people have lost their freedom simply by attempting to exert their energies to obtain information that we all want access to, that we all think we're better off for knowing. Human rights defenders going into some of the riskier parts of the planet to take up the case of people who've been dispossessed and are at risk, they need our support as well. How do we give them that support? How do we deliver for them the guarantees they should have as people carrying on what we all see as a good fight? Agenda 2030 declared to leave no one behind and therefore advancing sustainable development through human rights was elevated as an essential process. Promotion and protection of civil, cultural, economic, political and social rights, all this seen as essential to mitigate the national and international crisis. Member states and national human rights organisations and civil society need to speak again about the integration of human rights to create peaceful and just and strong institutions. The great threat, let me return to my opening remarks, is the shift in the world's climate patterns and the destabilisation of all aspects of our interaction as human beings living together on the planet's surface. Promoting democratic values is integrally linked to SDG 16. The public should have confidence in the way its judicial systems, public ethics in public institutions play themselves out. Sadly, according to Freedom House, there are 14 consecutive years in which global freedoms have declined. And that undermines what we all need, and that is strong, respected global institutions. But the Freedom of the World 2020 challenged us by finding, and I quote, "the unchecked brutality of autocratic regimes and the ethical decay of democratic powers are combining to make the world increasingly hostile to fresh demands for better governance," unquote. But it's that better governance that we need to achieve, we need to rally behind. And I ask you for your best thoughts on how we move forward this agenda of having the institutions we rely on work more effectively and avoid gradual erosion of authority and respect. Report 2019 reminded us that the UN recorded and verified a total of 397 additional killings of human rights defenders, journalists and trade unionists across what I think is a frightening total of 41 countries. So 41 countries out of the world's just over 190 are countries, are jurisdictions where these violations can occur. Member states and intergovernmental organisations have an obligation to protect the defenders and the reporters or the recorders of fundamental rights being undermined or corroded. Information is in fact vital. The world can't make the right decisions if denied access to information about the condition of life on the planet. So I want to encourage the panel's discussions and invite you to push the agenda, to push the frontier, so that we can see more clearly where we can protect those at risk and entrench more robustly their rights to the fair hearing, we think, which goes with being a human being on planet Earth.